Okay, so to figure out which sides correspond, you have to put the triangles in the same position. So what could we use here to figure out how to rotate the triangles so that they're in the same position? What could we use in this diagram? Okay, we have a 90-degree angle here and a 90-degree angle here. So I like to redraw the triangles so that they're in the same position because it makes it easier for me to visualize. So I'm going to keep this triangle, QRS, in this position, and I'm going to redraw the other triangle so that my right angles are corresponding. That way I can figure out which sides I need to determine if they're proportional. So the right angle is labeled as T. Which angle is S? The one on the right or the one up here? The one on the right. Now, so this would be U, right? So then one way you could do this, if you don't want to rotate your page around, is I've labeled this now TU. So I'm just going to look here. I have TU, which is 3.5. So that goes here, right? And then I have SU is labeled as E. So this is SU. So this side is E. And then that leaves me with ST, which is 4.0 centimeters. Okay, so we're trying to figure out the value of all the lowercase letters. Now, the way that you can do this is you have to figure out what your scale factor is, what the ratio is. So you need to look for two sides that are corresponding that you have two values for. Does that make sense? Yeah. Like I can't figure out how did I go from here to here because this is unknown. I can't figure out an unknown to an unknown. Two unknowns, you can't solve it. So I have 8 centimeters, which corresponds to 4 centimeters. I can figure out the scale factor. What is it? 2. How did you get that? 8 divided by 4 equals 2, right? So our scale factor is 2. So there's a couple ways you can do this. You can either say that we can go in order. We can look at each side length. So QR corresponds to which side length? Which side does this correspond with in the second triangle? This one, right? Pay attention. So I can say that is a C. Oops, this is a C, right? C over 3.5 is equal to what? What is that equal to? Is equal to what? You can either say it's equal to 8 over 4, or you could say it's equal to 2. I'm going to use the fraction because you're not always going to get a nice whole number. Sometimes you're going to get decimals, so I'm going to use the fraction. And we're trying to figure out what C is equal to. Do you understand why I set this up as a proportion? This side over this side is equal to this side over this side. All their ratios have to be equal. If they're not similar. So how can I solve for C? Yep. Cross multiplies one way, yep. So C times 4 is written as 4C, and then 3.5 multiplied by 8, whatever that is, we divide it by 4, and we can figure out. C is equal to 7. Now this one is a simple question. You could have done that in your head. You could have looked at it and said, okay, well 4 times 2 is 8, which means 3.5 times 2 has to give me that. What's 3.5 times 2? 7. This one was just very simple numbers. Okay, so because we have two unknowns now, I would say D over E equals 8 over 4, but if you have two variables and you cross multiply, you're not going to be able to solve this, right? So because these are right angle triangles, we can use what to solve for the third angle? The third side length. Pythagorean theorem. Okay, so we're going to go back and do Pythagorean theorem. Which one? Do you want to use Pythagorean theorem to find D or E? Does it matter? No. So what do you guys want to use? Which one do you want to find first? D? Okay, sure. So Pythagorean theorem. Okay, so I just redrew the triangle here so that we can focus on just this triangle. In Pythagorean theorem, what's the formula?
A squared plus B squared equals C squared.
How do you know where to label C always? The longest side, which is the hypotenuse, which is across from the right angle, always, okay? So this has to be C. Doesn't matter which one I call A and B?
No.
Nope. So let's call this A and B. And we're going to solve for C, right? 113 equals C squared, square root. What's C equal to approximately? So let's round it to 1 decimal place. So if you're wondering how to round your answers, look at the question. I should have wrote 7.0 here. If the question rounds it off to the nearest tenth, then when you're finding the answer for the other side, always round it to the same number of decimal places as the other side lengths are labeled. So what was it? 10 point what? You rounded it properly?
It's 10.6.
Okay, so 10.6 centimeters. So this is D, 10.6 centimeters, and we were trying to find E, right? Okay, so now that we found this side length, it corresponds to which side length in the second triangle? E. So 10.6 over E. Again, make sure you're writing it in the correct order. You can't write E over 10.6 if we're using the ratio of 8 over 4. So you could write 4 over 8 equals E over 10.6. Doesn't matter what order you write it in as long as you're putting it in the correct order when you write it, okay? So we just now cross multiply and solve for E. So E times 8 is 8E, and then 10.6 times 4, times 4, whatever that is, we're going to divide it by 8, and we're trying to solve. It's approximately equal to 5.3 centimeters. And how could you check to see if that makes sense? Take that and divide them. 10.6 divided by 5.3, what should you get? 2, right? The scale factor was 2. So you can check your answer at the end so that's correct.